All right, I will say good morning. Begin by thanking our sponsors, our Talmud Torah sponsors, for the month of Iyar, Yona Shushie Ehrenfeld, for dedicating the Shurim and Trashos this month, L'zecher nishmas Yona's grandfather, Yosef ben Shmuel Aron. Marc Karstaedt, for dedicating the Shurim this month in memory of his mother, Chana Bat Shraggai. Our week of learning sponsors, Leah Sol, in memory of her mother, Marguerite Streit, in commemoration of her 9th yahrzeit. And our Daf Yomi sponsors for today, the Plunka family, in commemoration of the yahrzeit, incredible, of Shmuel Hanavi. The yahrzeit is today Shmuel ben Elkanah. The Buchwalter family, in memory of Yudah Buchwalter, Yaakov Yehuda ben Usher Zeleg Halevi, who died and was buried in the Lodz ghetto on the 28th of ER 5702, 1942, and Michael and Rachel Cherniansky, in commemoration of the yahrzeit of Michael's mother, Jeanette Cherniansky, Shendel Bas Mordechai, Allah Hashem Zechron Levracha. We hope that in the merit of our Talmud Torah, all of the Neshamos Lav and Aliyah, the families in Chama, we thank all of our sponsors. And of course, we dedicate our learning today in the Zechus of Yom Yerushalayim, Baruch Hashem, celebrating the incredible contemporary miracle for our people of the regaining of the city of Yerushalayim. And an incredible zechus that we have. You know, sometimes, especially, you look in the news today and you see the clashes that are going on in East Yerushalayim. And sometimes the clashes and the politics overshadow the gift and the fact that we are blessed with the eternal capital of the Jewish people, of Yerushalayim, Yer HaKodesh, and Halavayim, Yirtz Hashem, will have greater ease in getting there, hopefully in the weeks and the months to come. But understand, we live in incredible times. For so many generations, when the Jew davened, Yerushalayim, Ircha Barachamim Tashuv, Jew davened to go back to Yerushalayim, it was an aspirational yearning. Maybe one day. Maybe one day. And today, Baruch Hashem, when we go to Yerushalayim, so again, our greatest challenge is to figure out which hotel we should stay at. Right? Where should I go? Who has the best breakfast? Who has, the best deals? And what a great zchus we have to live in these times. And we have to, so as we say, however you celebrate Yom Yerushalayim, the truth is every day a Jew has to thank HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that when we say that tefillah of Yerushalayim Ircha Barachamim Tashuv, it's no longer aspirational pining. It's real for us. It's real for us. And we hope that in the zchus of giving thanks to HaKadosh Baruch Hu for this great miracle, on this great day, that in Yirtz Hashem, Yerushalayim should be restored to its full glory, Eretz Yisrael to its full glory, with the coming of Mashiach Mehira B'Yameinu. Amen. And we'll say with that, let us begin. We have a beautiful daf ahead of us today. Today's daf is Chof Tes 29, and we are picking up in Yirtz Hashem on 28b. Chof Ches Amud Beis. We left off at the two dots. The two dots on the bottom. So we'll say, remember again, 5 lines after the line. So we'll say, remember again, Reb Masya ben Shmuel had a longer version of the exchange between the Kohen on the roof and the Kohen on the ground. Right? You had a whole machlokes, exactly what the speaking parts were. But again, that's not important for us for today. What's important for us today to remember is as follows. That in the beginning, apparently the exchange was very simple. A guy went up to the roof, and one word was Barakai, right? Barakai. That's it. Morning. Then they had this whole dialogue. Barakai. Okay, it's morning. Here, Mizrach Ad Chevron is until Chevron. So the Gemara says, why did they need this entire exchange? Because one time it happened that they got confused, and they confused the moonlight with sunlight. They thought ultimately again the day had already dawned. They offered up the tamid, and they realized they had offered up the tamid too early, and therefore as a result had to take the tamid out to the Beis Hashchita. Had to take the tamid out to be they slaughtered it erroneously, therefore it had to be burned. And again, as a result, going forward, they went ahead and they instituted this more intense dialogue, this dawn verification process. To which the Gemara says, simple question: do people really confuse sunlight, or I should say moonlight, with sunlight? So the Gemara says, we learn Rabbi Omer, Eino domet timor shalavana letimor shalchama. Literally, again, a ray of moonlight or a shaft of sunlight, does not get confused with a ray or a shaft of sunlight. Why? So moonlight, apparently, again on both sides, the beam remains constant, right? It remains ola kimakil, right? It's straight like a staff. Timur shalchama maftzil lekan lekan. Sunlight is often diffused in multiple different directions. So to which the Gemara says, Tana the Rabbi Shmuel Yom HaMu'unan Haya. It was a cloudy day. So as a result, the moonlight was diffused as well, and that's why the multiple rays made it look like sunlight. So the Gemara says, Papa Shmamina, the Evra Papa, so you see from here, Yoma de'eva kule shimsha. That I will say, interestingly enough, when it's cloudy outside, so clouds have the ability to diffuse the sun's rays. So apparently, like when it's sunny, sometimes the sun's strength can be concentrated in one area. When it's cloudy, the sunlight is diffused, and wherever the sunlight is able to get through is a powerful beam. So the Gemara says, okay, that's interesting, but what does it really matter? To which the Gemara says, L'shatuche oros, that to go ahead and spread out hides to dry. Interestingly enough, if it's a cloudy day, pretty much anywhere you put the hide is going to dry. Rashi says, liyavesh. Furthermore, again, the Gemara says, inami lichididarish rava isha lo salosh la bechama lo bechamichama. So we'll say this is very interesting. If you take a look, the Rashi points out, we had this in Pesachim, that a woman should not go ahead and knead dough outdoors on Pesach out of a concern that the heat of the sun may accelerate the chimutz process. Well, if it's a cloudy day, she really should not go ahead and knead outside at all, right? She should not knead outside at all because, again, anywhere where the sun manages to poke through the clouds, the sunlight will be intense and can intensify or accelerate the chimutz process. Good. Rabbi Nachman says, Zuama de Shimsha, Kashim is Shimsha. So we'll say this is very interesting. Rashi says over here, Zuama de Shimsha, Osa Chomsha Mu'unan. This is interesting. The Gemara says that the heat of a cloudy day could sometimes be more intense than the heat of a non-cloudy day. So the Gemara says, what's the simanach? What's the raya to this? Dana dechala. So we'll say the raya to this is poking a hole in a jar of vinegar. What does that mean? So apparently, if you just go ahead and you poke one hole in a jar of vinegar, the scent, the aroma that comes out is so strong because it's only escaping through one area. So to on a cloudy day where the sun is not able to come through every place, but only certain places, the heat becomes much more intense. So the Gemara says, Shavrivi de Shimsha, Kashu mishimsha. Rashi says over here, Shavriri de Shimsha, Sanverim, Mitagamina Shavriri Shemesh, Hano Keves, Bekoach Derech Nakav, Avim Kitanim, Hanosin Inov Kineged Anakov, Kashlan Saverim. Looking into a beam of sun that comes through the clouds is more detrimental than looking into the sun, the unadulterated sun itself. So the Gemara says, this simanach, what's the raya to that? Dilfa. So also it's very interesting. Dilfa means dripping. That it's more painful for a person to have constant dripping of water on their body than it is to fully immerse in water all at once. So too, again, the little bit of dripping, right, the ray of sun down on you or looking into that ray of sun could be more detrimental than the actual looking into the sun. Okay, says Gemara, we'll say top of Chavtes, an incredible Gemara here. Hirhure Avera, Kasha Me Avera. Both say constantly thinking about sin is even worse than sin itself. We're going to define this in just what this means in a moment. Look at Rashi. Hirhure Avera, Taivas Noshim. So Rashi understands this to mean constantly thinking about immorality. Right? Constantly thinking about women, thinking about immorality. Kashim lahachish es bisaro, yoser migufo shalmaisa. Has a greater detrimental effect on the body than the sin itself. So we'll say, this is what's interesting about this. See, Rashi's understanding over here that it doesn't literally mean thinking about sin is worse on a let's say a halachic level than sin. Obviously, that's not the case because lemaisa, again, the maisa avera, committing an act of an avera, is certainly much worse than thinking about an avera. Right? One is held responsible for their actions, not necessarily their thoughts. So the Gemara, that's why Rashi points out over here, Rashi says on a physical level, that literally, again, constantly thinking about chait weakens the body. It has almost like a physically detrimental effect more than the actual sin itself. So the Gemara says, V'simanach, the proof to this is Recha de Visra. So this is interesting. Rashi says, Recha de Visra, Hameriach basar tzli, kashalo reach ma'od shemisavalo. If somebody smells roasting meat, you smell a barbecue, and you can't have it, right? That desire to have what you cannot have could actually have a deleterious physical effect on a person. So I will say, this yesod of hirhure mitzvah, hirhure avera kasha me avera is a fascinating concept. So I want to quote to you, there is a beautiful svasem, because I will say, the reading of this, right, the Pashup Pshat is strange. That thoughts, preoccupation, and Avera is worse than the Maisa Avera itself. So everybody's bothered by this. Because at first, it's almost like, first of all, that's incredibly problematic. Because the truth is, like, I could work on controlling my behaviors. Controlling my thoughts is a whole different thing. And the notion that Hirhuri Avera, thoughts of Avera, even worse than a Maisa Avera, is a very scary notion. That's why Rashi understands it. To me, what Chazal are saying is the physical toll that preoccupation with sin, and specifically immorality, in other words, the physical toll that constantly yearning for illicit sexuality could place on a person's body physically is even worse than the physical toll that the Avera itself takes on you. The Sfas Semes, the Ger Rebbe says something a little bit different. Listen to how beautiful this is. He says, listen to this. Obviously, from a liability perspective, the commission of the actual physical avera is much worse than the avera itself. Aval hakilkul benefesh hu beikar al yedei ahir hurbo. The Rebbe say this is incredible. You see, when I commit an avera, I engage in a physical act of sin. What I'm doing is, I am negatively impacting the guf. Because the guf has sinned, so I'm negatively impacting the guf. When I constantly think about scheit, hirhur avera, says the Sasam, this is incredible, I'm actually impacting the neshama. So do you hear what's happening over here? Because think about this. Thought is the greatest koch we have. Thought is related to our ruchnius. Because the ability to think, cognition, the ability to process is part of our higher spiritual order. So when I am constantly preoccupied with hirhur chet, the Sfas Emes says, to a certain degree, that's actually more damaging to the neshama than physical hate itself. People say it's an incredible yisod. No, again, I want to be clear. From a liability perspective, of course, it's physical hate for which I have liability. You want to speak about an onesh perspective, punishment perspective, that's only if you commit the sin. Because Baruch Hu doesn't hold me responsible, so to speak, for my thoughts. But Lamaisa, when you want to talk about what takes a toll, and we know this, what really takes a toll on me, hirhur avera kasha me avera. When I sin, I know what I've done. I've done a negative physical act. I've impacted the guf. But when my thoughts are constantly preoccupied by illicit, inappropriate things, says the Sfas Emes, that's when I damage my neshama. That's what has the impact on my neshama. Both say incredible. But I want to tell you the converse is true also. Listen to this idea. The Rambam, beginning of Hilchos Tshuva, the Rambam says, Kishiyasa Tshuva, chayiv lehisvados. Parak Aleph, Halacha Aleph. When a person will do tshuva, he is chayiv to do vidui. Sort of gifter, zechatantik livracha. Rabbi Soloveitchik has the same idea. Says the what do you mean kishiyasa tshuva? When a person will do tshuva, chayiv lehisvados. Just say chayiv lehisvados. What do you mean kishiyasa tshuva? When a person will do tshuva. And Rav Gifter says so beautifully that there is a state of tshuva before vidui. And what's the state of tshuva before confession, before vidui? What he calls hirhure tshuva, thoughts of tshuva. We know this. That's the moment in my mind where I say to myself, things have to change. I don't even know what the change is. I don't know what the change is going to be, how it's going to manifest itself, what I'm going to do, where I'm going to go. But I just know that things have to change. And in that moment, Rabosai, where I have that level of cognition that things have to change, that's called hirurich, or thoughts of tshuva. That is already the beginning of the tshuva process. But I haven't done anything. I haven't changed anything. I didn't even clap. I didn't do anything. It doesn't matter. The same way that hirhure avera kasha me avera. Because when I'm constantly mentally preoccupied with sin, with desires, I'm damaging my neshama. Because hirhur, that thought, is part of my higher order of my ruchnius. The positive is true as well. When I flip that cognitive switch and I decide I want to be better. I want to be different. Even though I haven't executed, I haven't done anything with that, that already lifts me up. Incredible. So the Gemara goes weiter. Shili dekaita kasha mikaita. So the Gemara says, literally the end of the summer, right? The end of the summer, end of the Shili dekaita. Rashi says, Elo. The end of the summer is more intense than the beginning of the summer. The heat is more intense. Visi manach, and the raya is tanura shagira, an oven that's been heated. In other words, Rabbi said that the heat that occurs at the end of the summer is building on a few months of prior heat. So that heat is felt more intensely, just like an oven that's been fired up for a while, and then you kindle another fire in it. That subsequent fire generates even greater heat because it's coming on the heels of the previous heat. Good. So the Gemara says, Ashisa desisva kasha medekaita. Winter fever is more intense than a summer fever. Visimanach tanura karira. And the rayat, that is a cold oven. It takes a lot more heat to heat up a cold oven than it does to go ahead and heat up an oven that's already previously been heated. So Rebbe say, to get a fever in the summer when body temperature is already higher, is significant, but not as significant as getting in the winter. So to run a fever in the winter when body temperature is generally lower means it's a more intense fever. Good. So the Gemara says, this is great. I will say, good. Migmar, this is incredible. Migmar ba'tikta kashya mecharata. I will say, listen to this. It is more difficult to go ahead and relearn something that you have forgotten than to go ahead and learn something new. Well, say, take a look at Rashi for just a moment. This is incredible. Migmar ba'tikta kasha mecharata mishalamad v'siach daito shachach, somebody who learned something but then forgot what he learned. Kasha lachzer v'limod masha shachach yoser mimasha lo lamad. Well, say, sometimes in life it is easier to learn something new than it is to go ahead and relearn something that you have forgotten. The Gemara says, what's the raya to that? V'simanach tina bar tina. Both say this is incredible. Literally cement made from cement. So we'll say if you go ahead and you take a wall that was made of cement, and you go ahead, or you take something made of cement, and then you grind down the cement and try to make a new batch of cement, it's much harder to go ahead and remake cement from old cement than it is to just what? Make new cement. And I will say this is an incredible metaphor, not just in knowledge, but in life. Often there is this incredible kind of like dialectic. You know, say sometimes in life I have to go ahead and take what I have built, on a personal level, and kind of reconstruct it, right? It just needs to be tweaked. And sometimes in life I have to totally deconstruct that which I have built. We spoke about this on Shabbos. And I have to reconstruct something new. Because that which has been built is too difficult to forge into something new. I just need to create something new for myself. Because sometimes relearning that which you have forgotten is even more difficult than learning something new. Sometimes taking the you of old and remaking it into something new is more difficult than just starting all over again, as scary and as difficult as starting all over again is. This is the great challenge we have in life. When do I have to tweak myself versus when do I really have to start all over in building the self? An incredible yisod. Oh no, Yavo. My time is over. So we'll say back to the Gemara. So Rabbi Yavo says, what is Rebbe's logic? Where does Rebbe come from? Rashi says, the Amar Temer Shacham Mefatzeh. So we'll say, where does Rebbe get this idea that sunlight, that beams of sunlight disperse? So we'll say, we see this often. What do you mean, where does Rebbe get this? I mean, you're talking about observable phenomenon. So we'll say, so remember again, for the Jew, everything comes from Torah, one way or another. Even the things that are naturally observable in the world. The way I know it to be true is because it comes from Torah. Our truth, Rabbi say, comes from Torah. Our truth does not come from what we see. Our truth does not come from what we think, because what you see, people can see things differently. What you think one way, I think a different way. Our truth, the truths in life, ultimately emanate from Torah. So how does Rebbe know that halacha l'maisa, the timur shachama, the sunbeam, goes in and dissipates? Because the pasuk says la'matzech, for the conductor, al ayeles hashachar. I will say ayeles is a hind, a female deer, right? A hind. So the Gemara says al ayeles hashachar. Ma ayala zu karna maftilas lakan lakan. The ayala, the hind, her horns, go ahead and literally mafzilos lekan ulekan. They wind out in different directions. Af shachar zeh mafzia lekan ulekan. So too again the shachar, the morning sunbeams, go ahead and move from one direction to another. They spread out as well. Amar Rabbi Zera, lama nimshula Esther la'ayala. So we'll say, interestingly enough, there's a Masorah that Lam Natsech Alayelas HaShachar was written by David HaMelech B'Nevuah to refer to Esther HaMalka. Medrash actually relates that this was the capital that Esther said when she went into Achashverosh uninvited, right? And she says to Mordechai, "Kasher avarati, if I lose my life, I lose my life." Because we'll say this is the capital in which David HaMelech says, "Keli lama azaftani." Hashem, why did you leave me? So the Medrash, very moving Medrash, has Esther HaMalka reciting this capital as she's walking in. So why was Esther referred to Ayelas HaShachar? Lomar. Ma ayala rach matzar v'chaviva al baila. So the ayala has a narrow womb and is always desired by her husband. Kol shah, or her mate. Kol shah v'shah kishar rishona. Af Esther haiseh chaviva lachashverosh kol shah v'shah kishar rishona. Then I will say one of the miracles that occurred is that although Achashverosh had a harem filled with women, the woman he desired more than anyone was Esther HaMalka. Amar Rabbi Yassi, lama nimshula Esther l'shachar. Why was Esther compared to the morning? Ma shachar sof kol halayla, af Esther sof kol hanisim. I will say this is incredible. So why is Esther HaMalka compared ultimately to the morning? Just like shachar just like morning is the end of the night, so to Esther was the end of all miracles. Right? Megillas Esther is the end of all miracles. Gemara says, what are you talking about? Vayikach Chanukah. Right? Chanukah. Remember again, Megillas Esther takes place after the destruction of the first Beis HaMikdash, before the second Beis HaMikdash. Then they rebuild the second Beis HaMikdash. Then the Chanukah story happens towards the middle of the second Beis HaMikdash. So what are you talking about? To which the Gemara says, no. Nitna lichtov ka'aminan. So we'll say, ultimately, again, says the Gemara, what it means is Esther was the last miracle which was permitted to be codified and included as part of Tanakh. Right? The story of Esther is the last miracle to be codified and included in Tanakh. It's true, it's not the last miracle. There was still Chanukah, but I will say Chanukah was not included ultimately as part of Tanakh. To which the Gemara says, Alaman Damar Esther. So I'll say just before, actually we'll do it afterwards. We'll do it in a moment. So the Gemara says, Hanicha, Laman Damar Esther Lichtov. So we'll say, so remember again, this is a discussion of Mesachas Megillah as to whether or not Megillas Esther has the status of one of the Sifrei Tanakh at all. Now I will say, what's the ramification of being included as one of the? See, everyone agrees that there's a Megillas Esther. That's not a topic of dispute. The shaila is Megillas Esther part of Tanakh or not part of Tanakh? Is it just is it just a story, or is it one of the Sifrei Tanakh? Now I will say, now the nafkamina is whether or not it's metames hayadai. Remember again, there's halacha brought down in Mesechus Megillah. We saw it in Shabbos also, that Sifrei Kodesh metames hayadai, scrolls of Tanakh convey ritual tumah to the hands. It's rabbinic tumah, but it's ritual tumah. Now we're supposed to remember again, why did the rabbis institute that? Because remember what they used to do is they used to store truma next to scrolls. Because they said, High Kodesh, V'Hai Kodesh, they're both holy. What would happen? The mice would get in to the Aron Kodesh, because they would want to eat the Truma, and they would nibble at the scrolls as well. So in order to stop that from occurring, they said if you touch the scrolls, your hands become ritually impure. Now, again, I will say, if you touch then Truma, you make the Truma puzzle. So by going ahead and creating Tumas Hayadayim from hands that touch scrolls, they essentially totally uprooted the minhag of placing the truma next to the scrolls. In any event, so the Gemara says, "Machlokes, is Megillas Esther one of the Sifrei Tanakh or not?" So that's good according to the opinion that says that Megillas Esther was permitted to be written. I include in Tanakh. Elaman Damar Esther lo nitna lichtov my ikala meimar. But I will say at the end of the day, if you hold that Megillas Esther is not part of Sifrei Tanakh, then what does it mean when it says that Esther? Why does it refer to Esther? So remember again, the Gemara is trying to understand why is it that Esther Malka is referred to as Ayelas Hashachar, and the Gemara is suggesting that just as the dawn is the end of the night, so to Esther was the end of all miracles. Megillas Esther is the last book in Tanakh. To which the Gemara says that makes sense if you hold that Esther is included in Tanakh. But if you hold that Esther is not included in Tanakh, then why is Esther called the Ayelas Hashachar? Mokim Lakrib Shema Yafas, Amr Balazar, Shema Yafas, Amr Balazar, Lama Nimshalu, or Lama Nimshalu Tfilas and Shal Sadiq and Kayalas. So we'll see, right? According to the opinion who holds that Megillas Esther was not included in Tanakh, so Ayelas Hashachar doesn't really refer to Esther, rather it refers to the Tfilos of Tzadikim, to the prayers of the righteous. And why are the prayers of the righteous compared to the dawn? Lomar Lacha, Ma Ayala Zu, Kozman Shemegadelas Karnem Apsilos, just like this Ayala, this hind, as she gets older, her horns grow, right? They literally grow outwards. Af Tzadikim, so to the righteous, Kozman Shemarbin Bitfila, Tfilasan Nishmas. As long as they continue to pray, their tfilos are always heard. So you will say, ultimately, again, I just want to point out, it doesn't say that tfilos are always answered. Right? Remember, again, in general, we know that the power of tefillah is the fact that the Ribono Shel Olam hears every tefillah. What HaKadosh Baruch Hu chooses to answer, the way we ask for it to be answered or not, that's in the purview of the Ribono Shel Olam. But just like as the hind is growing, its horns continue to grow outward, so too, as long as the tzaddikim continue to daven, their tefillos will always be heard on high by the Ribono Shel Olam. Now, we'll say, we know that we paskin, like the Mandam who says, Esther nitna lichtov, that ultimately, again, Megillas Esther is included in Tanakh, is one of the Sifrei Tanakh, and therefore, again, I will say, the general drush as Lamnatzach, Ayelas Hashachar, is referring to Esther. And why is Esther called the dawn? Because just like the dawn is the end of the night, so too Esther was the end of miraculous activity. Now I will say, Chanukah, what about Chanukah? No. Esther was the last miracle that was included in Tanakh. So we'll say, interestingly enough, so the Bnei Yissaschar asks, I don't understand, why don't we have a Megillas Chanukah? I mean, there is a Megillas Chanukah or Megillas Makkabim, Megillas Antiochus, but it is not included in Tanakh. So if Chanukah was a miracle, why wasn't the miracle of Chanukah included in Tanakh? So also, listen to how beautiful this is. So the Bnei Yissaschar writes as follows. He says, Mivar, Dilachein lo nitna Chanukah likase b'nevuah. The story of Chanukah was not written. So also, remember again, Megillas Esther was written b'nevuah, was written prophecy. Let's say, how do you know Megillas Esther is written b'nevuah? How do you know? Because the Megillah tells us what Achashverosh is thinking, what Haman is thinking. The Megillah tells you parts of the story that Mordechai and Esther were not present for. So the only way that could have been written is if it was written b'nevuah. So as the Bnei Yissaschar, so why couldn't HaKadosh Baruch Hu just give nevuah to one of the Maccabim? Let them write Megillas Chanukah and include that in Tanakh. This is incredible. Kineis ze laholos ba sha'az nifseka nevuah ve'in chazon nifratz v'afa pikein lo afsa tikvasenu. Rabbi said this is incredible because you know what the power of Chanukah is? The power of Chanukah is that even in the absence of nevuah, Klal Yisrael continues to survive. Even in the absence of nevuah, we continue to be victorious. Even in the absence of prophecy, Klal Yisrael continues to stand, continues to. I will say, isn't that incredible? You see, nevuah is beautiful. But the whole kunst, the whole essence of the miracle of Chanukah is that even in the you might have thought, when there's no nevuah, there's no hope. Kamash Malon comes Chanukah and teaches us no. Even in the absence of prophetic communication, even in the absence of the Navi, even in the absence of Nevuah, Klal Yisrael continues to thrive. Klal Yisrael continues to survive. We are able to meet our challenges. We're able to overcome our enemies. Ultimately, again, even in the absence of Nevuah. Says the Bnei Yissaschar, that's the essence. V'adarabah, i.e. they are HaTorah, Zochar l'or HaGonos, and Tzom Ereis Chanukah, Shema Yisera. So we'll say, ultimately, again, it's through our dedication to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, through our dedication to Torah, through the purification of the external and internal mikdash, that Klal Yisrael enjoys its incredible nitzchias. So Purim is in fact the last Sefer Tanakh to be included with some element of prophecy associated with it, but the entire essence of Hanukkah is a miracle without prophecy, a victory without prophecy, which are both say why Hanukkah occupies such a special place in our hearts to this very day. Because the Hanukkah story is our story. It's the story of victory without prophecy. It's the story of the last 2,000 years. It's the ability for Am Yisrael to remain standing, even without so many of the accessories and accoutrements that made us so powerful for all those generations. Even in the absence of a Beis HaMikdash, even in the absence of a Navi, even in the absence of Nevuah, Netzach Yisrael lo yishaker. Incredible. The Gemara goes weiter. Shachtu as Tamid. So as I remember again, the Gemara tells a story where they went ahead and they shechted the Tamid before daybreak, and as a result, they had to go ahead and take it out to the Beis HaSreifa. So the Gemara says, Imas, when did this story occur? So you both say, the Mishnah is a little bit confusing, because the beginning of the Mishnah seems to indicate to us that we're talking about Yom Kippur. And certainly the end of the Mishnah is talking about Yom Kippur, because the end of the Mishnah talks about us taking the Kohen Gadol to the mikvah. So what's going on? So when did this story about shechting the Tamid at the wrong time occur? Seimas. Say if you want to say that it's during the rest of the year, lo sagid lav kohen gadol. So we'll say, so then remember, the way the Mishnah reads is right after this story of the Tamid shechted by night, they took the kohen gadol down to the mikvah. Well, if it's just a regular day, why are you starting the day with taking the kohen gadol down to the mikvah? Elu b'yom kippurim. Rather, it must have happened on Yom Kippur. But if it's Yom Kippur, ma'or halavana mi'iga. So we'll say, here's what's interesting. Generally, to have moonlight that is so strong, goes ahead and doesn't take place at the beginning of the month. Remember again, Yom Kippur is the 10th of the month. The moonlight would not be that strong on the 10th of the month so as to confuse it with sunlight. So it can't really be happening on Yom Kippur as well. To which the Gemara says, Ella Yom Kippurim Ma'ar Mi'ika. What does it mean to say? Yom Kippurim Ki Amar Barak Barakai Horidu Kohen Gadol Lebeis HaTfilah. Rather, the Gemara says, you're right, this story didn't happen on Yom Kippur. This story of the Tamid shechted at night didn't happen. It happened at a different time. So the first part of the Mishnah and the last part of the Mishnah are linked. The story in the middle has nothing to do with Yom Kippur. So the way you have to read the Mishnah is like this. On Yom Kippur, after the guy who was on the rooftop would say Barakai, it's dawn, they would take the Kohen Gadol down to the mikvah. Tani Avod Rabbi Avin Lo Zil Bilvat Amru Ela Af Malika Saof Ukmitzas Mincha Balayla. So we'll say for again, I just want to point out what the Gemara is saying over here is the Mishnah really is comprised of three parts, right? Parts 1 and 3 are connected. Part 2 is really its own separate story, right? So part 1 is the dawn of Yom Kippur, would start out by the individual on the rooftop saying Barakai, right? It's dawn. Once that happened, skip to part 3 of the Mishnah, where we take the Kohen Gadol down to the mikvah. Part 2, the middle part of the Mishnah, which contains the story where they went ahead and erroneously shechted the Tamid a little bit too early, that's a separate story. That really has nothing to do with Yom Kippur, separate story. Okay, so I'll say now the Gemara is going back and saying, by the way, this episode with an illegal shechita of the Tamid during the nighttime, causing the Tamid to go ahead and be taken out to the Beis HaSreifa, could happen also with Melika Sa'of. Right? So we'll say Melika Sa'of, remember again, Karban Oaf doesn't get shechita, instead it gets this interesting process where the Kohen goes in with his thumbnail, goes through the back of the neck of the bird, essentially severs its spinal cord, its vertebrae, and then goes in and flips off its head. Ukmitzas mincha. So what's a kmitzas mincha? Means Karban mincha. All the Kohen would take for you offer up also was what? 3 middle fingers worth of fine flour. That would be offered up on the Mizbeach. The rest is shirayim and consumed. So I'll say, what happens if you did malika or you did kamitza by night? Tisarif. Halacha l'maisik, and you have to burn the oaf and you have to burn the kamitza. So bishlama, ola sa'of ma'ida hava hava. So we'll say, I understand if you go ahead and you did malika at night, you have to burn the oaf. We'll say, why? Because what you did is irreversible. Ma'ida hava hava. Ella komets. But I will say, if halacha l'maisa, you took the komets illegally at night, I don't understand. I could fix that. Nahadra v'nikmitza b'yamama. Put it back. Put it back. So I'll say, remember when you do kamitza, you have like a bowl of flour. So you take the kamitza. You normally put the kamitza in a kli sharis, in a service utensil. Now it turns out you did it by night. No problem. Just put the kamitza back. with the rest of the flour and just try it again by day. To which the Gemara says, "Hutani lavahu amrala." So he asked and answered, "B'kli sharis mekach nafilu shalo bizvano." Because I will say, here's the issue: once you place the kamitza in a kli sharis, in a service utensil consecrates or sanctifies the kamitza, even if you're putting the kamitza in there at the wrong time. So we'll say that's the power of a kli sharis. A kli sharis sanctifies. And once the kamitza has been sanctified, halacha l'maisa, what? You can't put it back. There is no going back once it's been consecrated inside of a kli sharis. Look at Rashi. Kli sharis mekachin shlo bizmano. V'akometz ta'un matan b'kli. V'kevan shekidei shakometz b'kli. L'shen kometz eno chozer lios tevel kemincha shelo nikmitza. V'al me'achar shezek kari kometz inach havishirayim. So essentially what the Gemara is suggesting is, once you put it into a kli sharis, even though you put it in at night, it's sanctified. Because apparently a kli sharis has the ability to sanctify the kometz even at the wrong time. Even at the wrong time. The Gemara says, Meisvei, is that true? Zaklal, kol hakarev bayom kodesh bayom. Anything that is offered by day can be or sanctified by day. The kol hakarev balayla, kodesh balayla. Anything consecrated at night can be consecrated at night. The kol hakarev bo bein bayom bein balayla, kodesh bein bayom bein balayla. And anything which can be consecrated by day or by night can be consecrated by day or by night, which I will say tells you what. So therefore, again, a carbon mincha, which could only be offered up by day, right? Should only be sanctified, consecrated when? By day. And therefore, if you went ahead and you put the kamitza into a kli sharis, that shouldn't consecrate it. There is the kasha, to which the Gemara says, "Chatani mihas kol hakariv bayom kadosh bayom in balayla lo." So Dilma eno kadosh likarev ala kadosh lipasel. Oh, I will say maybe what it means is like this: under normal circumstances, anything offered by day could only be consecrated by day to offer it up. But it could very well be that an item offered by day can be consecrated even by night to make it possible. In other words, I will say, it's possible that a kreba mincha could only be consecrated by day. And therefore, the only way to go ahead and offer up that kamitza is to put it in a kli sharis by day. But halacha l'maaseh, if you put a kamitza in a kli sharis at night, although you can't offer up that kamitza, it becomes consecrated enough that what? That it becomes possible. That essentially you've created an irreversible process. So I will say, what it's saying is, the kli sharis essentially has two levels of sanctification. There's a sanctification level that allows you to offer up the carbon. That can only occur by day. But there's a sanctification process that makes it sanctified enough that it's an irreversible process. Which means I can't take the kamitza back out and put that back in with everything else. That could happen even by night. So Master Rabbi Zera says, raises the kasha. This is a very interesting case. Sidr es halechem es havazichin achar Shabbos. I will say now, under normal circumstances, so remember again, when do you put the lechem hapanim on the shulchan? You put the lechem hapanim on by day, on Shabbos day. So we'll say, listen to what happens in this case. In this case, for whatever the reason, you got delayed and you didn't put the lechem hapanim and the bazichin. The bazichin are the spoons of frankincense. You didn't put them on until Sunday. Okay? So now watch this. Sidr es halechem es habazichin achar Shabbos, v'hiktar es habazichin b'Shabbos. And I will say, what happened? You went ahead and you offered up the frankincense on the following Shabbos. So what's the halacha? I will say, psula. Ultimately, again, it doesn't work. Right? It's possible. Now, why is it possible? I will say, because you're lacking these. Normally, again, remember, the way it works is the lechem hapanim and the bazichin have to be on the shulchan from Shabbos to Shabbos. Here, you put it on Sunday, so therefore, again, by definition, it's lacking the requisite time. It wasn't on from Shabbos to Shabbos. So let's say, again, if you put it on Sunday, and you offer up the bazichin, you put the bazichin on the mizbeach, that Shabbos, it's possible. It's an invalid offering because you're missing time. To which the Gemara says, Keitzad Yaseh, so what should you do? Keitzad Yaseh, Yani Chenu L'Shabbos Haba. Both said, this is very interesting. What should you do? leave it on an additional week. We saw this already in Shkalim, by the way. Leave it on an additional week. Why? Shafilu amda ala shulchan yomim rabim ein bekach klomar. I will say this is incredible. Apparently, for the bazichin and the lechem aponim, the minimum amount of time they have to be on the shulchan is from one Shabbos to the next. But technically speaking, if you left it on longer, it's very interesting. If you left it on longer, that does not invalidate the lechem or the bazichin. So this is fascinating. If you went ahead and for some reason you missed Shabbos and you didn't put the lechem on the bazichin on the shulchan until Sunday, what should you do, Rabbi? Say, what should you do? Leave it on what? An additional week. So, and therefore what? And then essentially offer up the bazichin on the second Shabbos. Now, at that point in time, the lechem and the bazichin have been on the shulchan almost how long? Almost 2 weeks. But at least now they've gotten the requisite 7 days. So the Gemara says, but I don't understand why. Va'amai, tikdosh v'tiv. So I will say, but 1 second. Let's bring this all together now. You just told me that if you put a kamitza of mincha in a klishares at night, what does that do? We'll say, what does that do? What we said before, what does that do? It makes it possible. Now remember again, putting the mincha in the klishares at night does not allow the mincha to be offered up, but it makes it kaddish enough that it can't be returned to the rest of the flour, and essentially makes it possible it can't be offered up. So let me get this straight. So you're telling me now, I made a mistake. I put the lechem aponim and the bazichin on the shulchan on Sunday. I shouldn't have done that, right? I should have gotten the Shabbos. So I can't offer it up that Shabbos because it hasn't been on the shulchan long enough. I'm going to leave it on an additional week and offer it up the following Shabbos. But I don't understand. On that second Shabbos night, Rabbi, why doesn't the presence of the shulchan, really we're not talking about the lechem, why doesn't the presence of the bazichin on the shulchan effectively become pasul? Why doesn't it invalidate the bazichin the same way that putting the kamitza in a klishares at night rendered the kamitza pasul to be offered? Why doesn't the presence of the bazichin on that last Shabbos night render it pasul as well? Amarava, man de kamosif, shapir kamosif. It's a good kasha. Vavud Rabbi Abin Nami Masnisa Kamar Bekasav here we go, boss. I'm sorry, did I skip? I'm sorry, did I skip? Good. I'm sorry. Man de Kamosiv, Shapir Kamosiv, Vavud Rabbi Abin Nami Masnisa Kamar Bekasavar. Laila in Mukhusr Zman, Yom Mukhusr Zman. So listen to this. Here's the fundamental difference. Here's the difference. Laila is not Mukhusr Zman, but Yom is Mukhusr. Rabbi said this is very interesting. The night before. Okay, here we go. See, Rabbi say there's a concept Mukhusr Zman. Mukhusr Zman means as follows: that a carbon, right? Every single carbon has a particular time that it has to be offered up on, and if that carbon is lacking the requisite time, that's called Mukhusr Zman. See, Rabbi say when you go ahead and you put the lechem on the shulchan on Sunday, that lechem is Mukhusr Zman. You're lacking the requisite time. When you go ahead and you put a kamitza inside of a klishares at night, interestingly enough, as much as it can't be offered up, that's not Mukhusr Zman. The Rabbi say, it's interesting, why is it not Mukhusr Zman? Why not? Because nighttime is the beginning of the day. So technically speaking, I'm in the calendrical correct ballpark. I just can't offer up the carbon at that time. But you hear the difference? See, when you put the bazichin on the shulchan on Sunday, that's Mukhusr Zman. Because the bazichin should have been put on the shulchan when? On Shabbos. So I am lacking the requisite time. But when you put the kamitza inside the klisharis at night, it's not an issue of Mukhusr Zman. I'm in the right time. I'm just in the wrong time frame. So calendrically, I'm correct, just in the wrong part of that particular day. Therefore, the Gemara says, so kasavra laila in Mukhusr Zman, Yom Mukhusr Zman. Well, that's we'll just read one more line. Kimati beishimshi tikdosh v'tifsal. If that's the case, Rabbi say that by the bazichin, when you come to the second Shabbos night, shouldn't the bazichin then ultimately again become kaddish and ultimately then become pasul. Amravina shekidim v'silko. We'll say, what do you do on the second Shabbos night? You remove the bazichin on Shabbos night and you put them back on Shabbos morning. So Gemara says, you don't have to do that. Why? Kevan shesidro shaloki mitzvaso nase kimoshe sidra kov. So we'll say, here's the difference. When you put the bazichin on the shulchan on Sunday, we'll say, what's the halachic impact of putting bazichin on the shulchan on Sunday? To which the Gemara essentially says, it's like a monkey put it on there. In other words, it's like nothing. The act of putting bazichin on the shulchan on Sunday is a halachically irrelevant act. The only time the act becomes relevant is when Rabbosai is on the next Shabbos. And then halacha l'maisa, once it happens the next Shabbos, then what? Then you leave it on for another full week, and then it becomes impactful for the week after. So Rabbosai, so just to tell you this, because at least we have to stop. So halacha l'maisa, the Gemara says, all the Gemara is pointing out, remember just how we got into this topic. We spoke on a tamid that was shechted by night. And what's the tamid that's shechted by night? What's the impact of that? It's possible you have to take it out to Beis HaSreifa. All the Gemara says, it's not just tamid. We'll say, what happens if you put kamitza in the klishares at night? What happens? It's possible. Why can't you just put it back into the rest of the bowl with the rest of the flour? Why not? Because we'll say what it turns out of this halacha l'maisa, the klishares ultimately again is mekadeshit. But it's mekadeshit ultimately not enough to offer it because it happened that night. But it's mekadeshit enough to go ahead and make it pasul. Contrast that with the act of putting the bazichin on the shulchan. Halacha l'maisa, if you put the bazichin on the shulchan on Sunday, what's the halachic impact of that act? 0. What do you have to do? You have to leave it on through Shabbos. Once Shabbos comes, then it's killed, the bazichin were put on. You leave it on to the next Shabbos, and then it can be offered up. That's the Shabbos. So stop over here. Continue to do that tomorrow.